taking us through all this wonderful things happening within Salesforce.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning too.
The actual agenda is very, 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 very sparse. One, it's actually about, when I actually spoke to Sarah about this, doing this particular thing, she said to me, at the heart of everything we do is a participant. And the whole thing is around program management, is that as you work with your participants or your service users, it's about the programs you're actually running with them and the way you manage that. Manage that not just from a point of view of actually delivery, but also from a point of view of gaining insight into how things can be done better. So today in this 40-minute session is very much around how Tottenham Hotspur Foundation is actually using program management to actually help them to deliver better. I've only got a couple of announcements to make. One is around the chat function. If you've got any questions, please actually put them in the chat box, and we will get to answering them afterwards. And the second thing is we're going to record the session. So if you don't want your face shown, which would be a shame, you can just take it off. But the idea is that we can actually come back and use the session. Hello. We can actually use the session later. Hello. For those people who weren't able to be here.
Sorry, Ross, I must have started that. I've just picked you up.
I think there's a ground rule, Clyde, that participants turn their mics off if they can whilst they're participating, because I think someone's just joined and doesn't realise that we're listening to their other conversation.
I think I checked it yesterday and it was
Okay, there's one other announcement which I just want to echo what Sarah said. If you can please turn your mic off until you're ready to ask your questions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Sarah and Remy, who will speak to you about how they're using program management at Tottenham Hotspur Foundation.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining in. So we're going to try and take you through quite quickly from really a big picture perspective of why ShoNet, why Salesforce, and what we're about as a foundation and how we utilize it. And so we've been using it from, I think we went live from 1st of July 2020, decided to go ahead with this in early 2019. And what you can see on there is a nighttime image, fantastic image, I should say, of the stadium complex. So the foundation, we're part of the club. We are a separate registered charity. And where if you think of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, and I'm sure you're all Spurs fans, that's why you're on this webinar. And so blue is your colour. So, but every professional football club in the UK, and there's about 110 of us, we will have an arm which is linked to good causes and linked to making a difference in their communities. And our communities are 4 London boroughs. But what's really important for us, so our office actually is just about here, in part of this Georgian complex here. All of this is the Spurs Stadium complex. We've been home in Tottenham since 1890. Spurs have been here. And when we walk out of our front door, if I turn right out of our front door, 2 minutes we're into the London Borough of Enfield, but we are in the London Borough of Harringay. And all of this is really important because what we're about as an organisation is to be able to, I suppose, bring the magic of football into our work, which is about socioeconomic regeneration within our communities. So most of you will know Spurs from what they do on the pitch. And so in some respects, I like to think that I'm the equivalent of Nuno Santos, who's the manager of Spurs at the moment. I'm the equivalent, and my pitch is the 4 London boroughs, and my team, I've got a team of about 50 staff. Now, one of the members of that team is Remy, and Remy, if you can give us a wave. And So Remy works in the central part of the business, and if you think of any business, you've got a central corporate headquarters. And am I repeating myself? Can you guys hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Sarah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was telling me I had a bad connection. Within that, so obviously in any business, you have a sort of corporate center, and then you have your delivery arms. That's in a very simplistic viewpoint. So Remy sits in the corporate center, and Remy, when we decided that actually, he looks after data in the center, and in about late 2018, we decided that really we want to become paper-free and be able to manipulate our data as much as possible so that we can analyze, we can determine how do we move forward, and obviously look at how we make progress. So I said to Remy, does he know anything about Salesforce? He said no, and I said, well, you're going to learn it, and you're going to learn it because you're going to be our lead in really helping when we work closely with Clyde and ShoNet and his team, who we selected because of their own values. They are a local to Spurs. They're a local business and very much committed to the same things that we're business. And I'm sure if they were a charity, they'd have similar things to what we have. But this is about, from their perspective, using data and information. So that's the charitable purpose that you can see up there on the board. And our charitable purpose, what I'm just going to take you through is how we translate that into what we actually do on the ground. And so first of all, and this really actually reflects our structure of Salesforce, or how we've organized our data into Salesforce. So our charitable purpose, we pursue these through medium-term strategies, broadly 5-year medium-term strategies that we're looking at. That's why it's medium-term. And we've broken this down, analysed it into 4 strategic themes. So you can see those themes there in yellow: football and sport, health and well-being, character building, jobs and careers. And the importance of that is that when we decide what are we going to do, it can all fall into one of those 4 streams. And when we decide what we're going to do, our projects, so those little goals there are symbols of projects. So beneath each one of those themes are a whole group of projects, and they all contribute to the overarching goal of this foundation. And those overarching goals are shown on this screen. So you can see there the heading is medium-term strategy goals to be achieved by 2024. And this applies for individuals, so residents, people that work in our areas, and as I mentioned, there are 4 London boroughs that we primarily focus on, our communities in those areas, and our communities are diverse. For example, we've got the largest Ghanaian community in the UK concentrated in our area. We have a very large Turkish community in our area, very large Somalian community. And actually, if I look across the 2 boroughs that we really work intensely in, and that's due to the nature of the lack of prosperity, I'd say, rather than the levels of deprivation, those 2 areas, really from a demographic perspective, probably 35% of them, if we look at it from an ethnicity perspective, are white English. The other 65% are obviously BAME, but of that 65%, half of them are roughly white BAME, and the other half are black BAME. So we've got a really diverse community, rich in diversity there. And what's really important to us, the individuals, communities, and the place itself that we work with, that we can make a difference, so that overall, individuals, communities, and place have better health and well-being, and that they have a better positive brand after interacting with us. And we like to interact with people for many, many years, bring a sustainable long-term change. And through those 2 things, better health and well-being, more positive brand, that people can have better prospects and can be pursuing and fulfilling their potential. So that's our real headline of how we try to translate what our objectives and purposes are into what our goals are. So what I've really just tried to go through with you is our goals. So you can see that in green, big corporate goals, our 4 strategic themes. And at the moment, we have about 29 projects that fall under different groupings of programs, and that's what those symbols there are showing. So, so that's the context. I'll just move on one more. And this is about, well, how do we organise ourselves as a business and where do those responsibilities lie? And the relevance of this is, again, how we've structured Salesforce to enable us to report not only by individuals, communities and places, ultimately it comes down for those individuals and their postcodes, but also to enable us to report to the relevant entities. So from an internal perspective, our board owns that medium-term strategy. And as the chief executive, I'm responsible with the board for ensuring that happens. And I depend on my senior leadership and management team. And that senior leadership and management team is made up of 2 program heads that are responsible for everything we deliver. So one program head is responsible for everything that relates to physical activity and getting people fitter and healthier in mind and body. And another program head, their overall goals is to work towards attainment, whether it's attainment of young people at school, doing really well at school, then going on into further education, continuing education, or getting into quality employment, or attainment for those that have already left school, and they could be any age, but they're not economically active. So we support them getting into jobs and careers. And in turn, they will have a number of project leads that are responsible for our variety of projects within that context. So today's session, what I'm looking at today is how do we get all this information into Salesforce, and then what do we do with it? And remember, when I mentioned earlier on that part of what our drive of what we're trying to do really is also reduce any dependency on paper, do everything through digital. And that's why I've got these 2 symbols at the top here. Because everything we do, all our information can be put into our Salesforce system remotely. And that includes information from all our participants, the individuals. So focusing today, as Clyde mentioned, we're focusing on our participants, which I've termed here individuals. When we take you through Salesforce, I'm going to look at a project which is all about character building, where we use football. And this is after school football, evening football, weekend football for young people from the ages of 8 through to 24, use that as a means to build their character. We put this under character building because it's all about their personal development. And then we're also going to look at how do we keep data when we're progressing a project which we've been commissioned to progress by this time by the NHS, and it's about getting people fitter. And in particular, project we're going to take you through is a project where we get referrals from GPs and from hospital consultants for people that are suffering from cancer, whether they're going pre-op or whether it's post-op. So we'll take you through 2 lots of data that we can have, and it's all about how we record data so that we know what's happening for these individuals and how we can walk back to our partners. So I'm going to hand over now to Remy, my screen to Remy. So I'm going to try and stop presenting, which this might be easier said than done. And I'm going to hand over to Remy. Are there any questions in the meantime whilst Remy shares his screen, just on the sort of that big picture context?
We've not seen anything in the chat, but if anyone wants to raise a question, they can unmute themselves.
Okay, so I assume silence is no good. Well, I can't see actually if people have raised their hands. But Remy, one thing if you could just do for me before you do, so on that screen, if you could just take us to the top of that screen first of all. I just want you to see that full circle at the very top. Thank you. So what Remy's sharing with you is my performance dashboard as the chief executive. Every project head, every program head will have their own performance dashboard. I'm sharing with you the one that I look at. And first of all, I should say any projects that we do, any initiative that we do, has to have a risk assessment undertaken before it can get the go-ahead to start. So there might have been a business case, said it was all viable, might have done all the logistics, but it cannot start until we're satisfied that 100% every operational aspect has been covered. We know that our staff are trained, we know we've got safeguarding agreements with the relevant parties. And this is so that we can give assurance that whatever we're doing is safe, that whatever we're doing is in line with all our standards and values. And what this is simply showing you that circle, which I think Remy's going to show, that circle is showing you that over this period covered, that we've had 116 risk assessments we've been asked to consider, or sorry, that we've passed to say, yes, those projects can go ahead. And they're just grouped based on the different projects. So if you see that big bundle of orange one, which is called 20, this says there's 25 there, they relate to the project called KICS, which we'll be looking at in a minute. And then on the right-hand side of that box that says outstanding risk assessments, these are ones that will pass through and maybe for whatever reason have not yet been given the approval to go ahead. In some instances, they may not be quite ready to go ahead. In others, that we're waiting on data that enables us to say, yes, we're satisfied, they can go ahead. So if we can now shift up and have a look at the dashboard that tells us about Premier League KICS. So Premier League KICS is the project that I spoke about, whereby it's character building and personal development for young people, and we do that through football. It's called PL KICS, PL stands for Premier League, and the Premier League fund us to do this particular project. So what this dashboard shows me, so in that first square where it says engaged participants, we can see that the target is 900 participants. And then you can see a dial. And this dial is really like, it's real time, so it's a bit like if in your car and you're driving along at 40 miles an hour and you suddenly press the gas and you go up to 50 miles an hour, that dial goes up to 50. Exactly the same with here. Anytime a participant joins in a session, that dial moves up. So in this one, the target is 900. We can see already with our data that we've got 902 participants that are there. So we're well on target there. And if we wanted to, we're not going to do it at the moment, we'll show you how that's based on the participants. But from our target of 900, you can see we've got female participant target of 270 we've got to go for. So that's 30% of our participants should be 270. When I look at this and see that I've only got 103 female participants at the moment, I will immediately in my discussions with the program lead say, what's happening here? Why have we only got 103 when we've seen 902? I'd expect to see a higher number. And then when we start unpacking, you can get a better appreciation of what's happening and what we need to do to make sure we're on target for the year end of 270 in that example. With Premier League KICS, we really try and focus on participants aged 14 plus. And this is the young group. We review KICS, and as I mentioned earlier, takes place after school, evenings, weekends and holiday time. We like to think of it actually as like a 21st century youth club. It's things for young people to engage in. It started off as football on estates, and they'll do this all over the country. Again there, so we're looking for quite a significant number of the participants to be aged over 14. We're looking for 200 of our participants. In this example, our target is for 200 participants at least to have participants with disabilities. And in fact, what you can see there based on this information we have at the moment, we call sandbox. Obviously, we're using mock information here. There would only be 16. So again, this would be alarming for me that there's only 16, but we'd know that actually that in a few weeks' time, when we look at our calendar, we can see that we were working very closely with some special schools, which will help us increase those numbers. And then finally, the final box that we've got on this dashboard is participants attending a competition, because one of the things about football and how that can bring about change in people's lives is actually through teamwork and social interaction. So the more we get kids participating in competition, the better. It also shows that those young participants are sustaining engagement with us. So again, that is telling us here that actually we have a target of 180 attending a competition. We've already met that target, but that doesn't stop us going on. So Remy, could you just tell us about, so a young participant, yes, but let's just pretend a young Clyde Williams, aged 14, wants to join in. First of all, they have to register with the foundation, don't they? And they have to get the approval of their parent to do that. Any participant has to register. Can you show us how they'd register? And remember, all of this is done remotely. You can do it from your mobile phone, you can do it from your desk. So if you could show us a form that you've designed, Remy.
Yeah, so this is an example of a registration form. So as Sarah mentioned, everyone that wants to join any of our projects will have to register first because we need their details. So this is an example of a young Harry Kane that wants to join KICS. So they'll complete this form. Any details, medical details, image consent, permission to travel, emergency contacts, and then they'll click submit. Afterwards, there's a signature required, and then it will go into our system.
Now, I think one of the important things about this is, and this was really important in selecting who is our partner to develop for us, because I've been very mindful. My career has been quite lengthy career. I speak to different people about IT and what systems they use, whether they're happy with them or not. And one of the things that my experience has been in the past, that you can have the most fantastic system, but then when you want to bring about change, it's very costly. So one of the things, so what we're able to do with ShoNet is enable to train our staff, so in this example, Remy, to design the electronic forms. And we work very closely with ShoNet. So our ongoing agreement with ShoNet is that we work together so we can design our own forms. Any form we want to design, we could do it ourselves. And every one of those cells in those forms then goes into a cell in this database that is Salesforce. So, okay, we've got Harry Kane registered with us. What if Harry Kane wants to go to a session? Let's pretend this evening we're running a kick session at a place near the stadium. How would we know Harry Kane wants to do that?
Yeah, so the next step would be for us to contact all our participants with what's going on, like our schedule. So we do that every week. So we send them an email every week with links to booking forms. So every session has a unique booking form, very short form, because we already have their details. So here Harry will just complete his details and submit the form, which then goes into our session on Salesforce, so the specific session.
Okay, so in that example you've given us, so what we've seen are the forms that the participants complete. What would the manager see, or the project lead see, or even, for example, we're sitting here now, and if I was being nosy and seeing how many people have signed up to this session, what would we see on Salesforce?
Yeah, so on Salesforce, a staff member would go into the session, which is this, where you see the staff member. So in this example, it's Rakim.
Can't see it yet. Well, I can't see it on my screen.
A second. Is it there?
Not on my screen yet. Is it on anybody else's screen?
Okay.
I can see it too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't see it, so you take us through it, Remy.
Yeah, so in this example, you see that Rakim is the staff member, and you can see that 5 people have booked themselves on the session. So the next step here would be for our staff to confirm that a person has actually attended the session.
And they do that when the person turns up? Sorry to interrupt you, Remy, because I can't see that screen. So when Harry Kane turns up for the session, we know he's booked for it. That doesn't mean he actually turns up at 3:30 or 4:30 or whenever the session starts. But when he does turn up, then in that example, Rakim will register him in on his phone or his device.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So all our staff members have the Salesforce app on their phone. So what Rakim will want to do here is go into Harry Kane's record and tick the attended box.
And that attendance box is automatically ticked, isn't it? My understanding, when Rakim enters it at the session.
Yeah, so Rakim will do it on his phone. Yeah, and he will tick in Harry Kane if he turns up.
Okay, fantastic. So I think that's the example that we've got. If you can go back to the dashboard. So on that dashboard, if we were watching this real time, just pretend we're in that car and we're pressing our foot on the accelerator and 6 people Harry Kane turns up, each one of those needles, well, not the female needle, but the other needles would each go up by 1, and possibly not the disabilities needle would go up by 1. But they would move as soon as they've been entered and booked in. So that's the example with KICS. Now I want us to use an example. So the other example I said that we would use is with a project whereby we're commissioned. So this is a contracted project. We go to the NHS, they advertise it, they want providers to deliver it. So we're commissioned to do a project for, and this particular one is for people, as I said, with cancer. So we call this project Move for You, and you can see the title there. And it's got HWB in front of it because it's part of the health and well-being strategic theme. Now, what I've asked to see here, what I asked Remy to show with us, even though this is my dashboard, is share some of the things that the project, the head of program, the overall head responsible for this area, Katrina, would look at. So there's actually, her dashboard would be much more detailed than mine because I'm only looking at the summary information. But in this example here, we can see that we've had 279 people referred from the hospital or from the GP to engage in this 12-week program. And of those 279, in this example, you can see that 122 were contacted within 72 hours. Now, that's not good. So Katrina would look at this and think, why is only 122 being contacted within 72 hours? Because Katrina would know that her target is for 75% to be contacted within 72 hours. Remember, I'm using this as an illustrative purpose, illustrative purposes for today. So Katrina would then be able to hone in and speak to her manager about why there appears that discrepancy. I want you to go down to the next bit, Remy. Oh, sorry, before we go on to the next bit, can you just show us again? So if a participant was coming on Move for You, they have to book again? They'd register with us, wouldn't they, first of all?
Yes, exactly.
Signed a registration form.
Yeah. So for Move for You, because it's we're supporting people with cancer, there's a lot more information that we need to collect, which is why this form has 5 pages. So the first bit is very similar to KICS, but then as we move on, you'll see that we collect health information on them and measurements at the end.
Now, the importance of this is of having that health information is because as a commission program, and this will happen with some of your own funders as well, is that we need to be able to determine the progress, the difference that we're making. When they come to our sessions, and a lot of these sessions will be one-to-one first of all, and then we might get them working in groups together, that we need to know how are they progressing from when they started with us. So this week 1 questionnaire has all the base data on it. And then we measure them again after 6 weeks, so midway through the program, and we measure them after 12 weeks at the end of the program, and then we do a further measurement with them 6 months after the end of the program. Now that's how this program is structured. It could be that with some programs, we might measure them every week. You know, it's a bit like, I suppose, if we were Weight Watchers, you're measured every week when you go to Weight Watchers, for those of you who've gone to Weight Watchers. But you're measured every week. This one, you're measured 4 times, 3 during the program itself, and then we want to know that that difference is really being made, because what's really important for health and well-being and for character building is that what we offer is that we're with people for their whole journey and that they can sustain those improvements. And what we do at the foundation, if they're not able to sustain it, they can easily come back. So bearing that in mind, can you take us back to the dashboard again, Remy? So there's a big box there saying the Move for You questionnaire is completed. And you can see, I'm looking down the vertical side, you can see that M1 means the first week, that they would have, how many of them completed in the first week, how many have completed their questionnaires after week 6, how many have completed them after week 12, and how many have completed them, this is after 6 months, which is the follow-up. So Katrina will look at this in quite a lot of detail because she manages overall. And then if you can go up just one little bit more, Remy, in terms of the, in fact, will you click on one of them for us?
Yes, so there's an example that we used to show you the questionnaire results.
In this example, we've got Betty Boo as the participant.
Yeah, so as you can see here, Betty Boo has completed the 4 questionnaires. And then this is how the manager will then be able to see any difference that we've made. So all the fields that you see here is actually questions that we asked on the questionnaire. And here you can compare it. So in this instance, you can see that at the start, her cancer was stable, and then she went into remission at week 12, and then after 6 months as well.
So Remy, so on this goes back to the questionnaire, which again is in an electronic form, which Remy designed based on the brief given by the manager, the program lead, Katrina, who said that we need to measure their cancer status at the beginning, their cancer treatment response during their time with us, how much walking they did outside of work, how much labour they did outside of work. I don't know what labour is outside of work, but hey, that sounds like hard work. And then how much active homework that they did. And if you can see this, it's about activities. So somebody might like dancing. So how much dancing did they do? This is bespoke. You could add anything to it. And that's all done through just redesigning the forms. And this is incredibly powerful for us, this particular tool. So when we first met with ShoNet and said it's so important that we can control that flexibility, what they identified for us was that you can control that through your electronic form design. So Remy, was there anything else you wanted to say about this screen?
No. So as you mentioned, anything that we collect on the forms will need to have a place on Salesforce, and that's how the data goes into the system and how we can start comparing it.
And one of the things, obviously, with Salesforce, it's such a huge database that you can just add any cells that you want to add. So I just want to tell you again then what I do as the chief exec and what the program head will do, Katrina, in this particular example. We have a calendar attachment to it. So I'd just like us to go to the calendar. And this enables resource planning, but it also enables myself and the board to get a good sense, because board have access to this. They have their own dashboard as well, specific for the board. Obviously, they don't want to be inundated, particularly with detail. But what this calendar shows us for the month of August is what are the KICS sessions that are going on. So all these are green, they're all KICS. And so can you do me a favour, Remy? Could you just, for example, let's go on to Friday the 13th.
So you can go into a view that shows you the days, and then you can shift. So I'll go to the 13th now.
Okay. And this, and remember, with our KICS sessions, they take place after, in fact, Friday 13th is summer holidays, but if it wasn't summer holiday and it was school time, you'd only see KICS sessions taking place after 3:30 because it's after school. During the summer holidays, though, we do them during the daytime as well, and that's why we can see here from 10 o'clock through to 2 o'clock, we did a football road show, and this was at Trent Park. So this tells us, so if we can go back to that main calendar look, so pretend I'm interested, okay, that's KICS. Let me see, when are we doing Move for You? Because we might be using the same staff. Some of our staff that are on KICS are trained to do that exercise, and some of those exercise, those specialists that do the exercise sessions can also do football. And where Remy's cursor is at the moment, those are all of our project groupings. So there you go. So we can now see where all our Move for You sessions are taking place and on what days they're taking place. So this is a fantastic tool for resource planning. It also enables us to look at, okay, we've seen this is August, what is coming up? I like to always know 3 months ahead what we're planning. And it's really important because remember, these are participants that can choose to join us or not. So we've got to be really clear for the whole year, when are we running sessions and where are we running sessions. So on this KICS one, let's go back to that very first KICS session we spoke about, Remy, whereby, where is that? Can you show us from a geographical perspective?
Yeah. So we have
this is
the data on a map, so anything related to addresses.
So with this one, so we can see here, big picture, this and that circle in that little circle that's covering the E in Tottenham. If you can just circle that, Remy, yep. that's where this session is taking place. Okay, so it's actually taking place in the stadium. And then what we've got here is a map that shows them where the participants on that session, where their home address is. So one of the things I'd be interested in, how many of those are from the London Borough of Haringey, and how many, for example, are from the London Borough of Enfield? Because remember, the boroughs that we serve, our foundation serve, are Haringey and Enfield and Barnet. So can you show us how you do the layering system, Remy?
Yeah, so the mapping tool works in layers. So the first layer here, we just asked show us this specific session. So now I can add a layer that will add the Borough of Haringey to it. So if you then go back into the layers, it would tell you that we have 5 in total on the map, and then here in Haringey that there's 4 of them.
And if we wanted to go on to, let's just say, click on one of them, can you tell me who lives, tell me who lives in Waltham Forest?
Yeah, so if you click on it, so you can decide which fields you want to see. So this tells you that Harry Kane lives in Waltham Forest, actually. So he's 17.
Okay, and he's the participant there. Now, part of the importance of this for the foundation is that in our medium strategy, we have prioritized our focus for where we're really trying to bring around a difference along the high road, and that is from South Tottenham, where you could show on your, you know where South Tottenham is, don't you, Remy?
Yeah.
There you go. We've prioritized a lot of our activities from South Tottenham all the way through to the M25. So one of our goals, and it's all up the high road all the way through, so one of our goals for this year is that any resident that lives along that section from South Tottenham along that high road all the way through to the M25, there'll be no resident that is more than 15 minutes walk away from physical activity that they could participate in, at least weekly, free for them, organised by Tottenham Hotspur Foundation. So what I look at is, are we pursuing our medium-term strategy? I could ask, I'm not asking you to do this, Remy, because obviously we're not prepared for this. I'm going off-piste, so to speak. I could ask Remy, if we were using our proper database, show me how many participants along that whole road or that whole section are participating in our projects. And that will give me a good flavour. It helps us then to start targeting what we want to do. The London Borough of Haringey asks us questions about the participants, where we're delivering. So do our other boroughs. So you can layer in any format that you want to layer. So again, this is a fantastic tool to enable planning, to enable focus, to see what you're see what we're doing. So I think we'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you for walking us through how a participant can get involved with you, and two, the kind of information that you as a chief executive use to make sure that you're on track. Now, are there any questions?
Clyde, yes, we had one from Councillor Matt. He was asking, do PLCF insist that you also enter your Kickstarter interviews?
Ah,
Yeah.
so the councillor knows what he's talking about. So Views is a Premier League data system, which is used specifically for their projects. And yes, they do require that. Now, the Premier League are currently looking at new systems for their data collection. Views is quite limited in what its ability to do. And one of the things that I should say, when I came into the organisation in 2018, we were only using Views. It is limited in its ability, and what's really important to us as a foundation, that we're developing everyone that we can develop. So therefore, if you have a tool that is portable, so we've, you know, one of my fears now is, having created Remy as a supremo in Salesforce with us, he could go off and become a Salesforce specialist anywhere. Now, it's a fear for me and a selfish fear for me, but actually we're all about developing people, and it's really, really important. And what ShoNet is doing, along with ourselves, we're looking about how can we develop many more people to become Salesforce administrators and analysts from our community. And that's really, it's a good question actually, Councillor. And I know I'm going on a bit, but the importance of that for me is we've got high levels of unemployment in our communities. And what we know we can do through working with young people in our communities that may not have even thought about going into Salesforce and data, we can work together to create apprenticeships together, and so that we offer them. In fact, we're just taking on apprenticeship now, and I know that Salesforce are doing that with others. So yes, and also the Premier League Charitable Fund are looking at Salesforce for their data systems as well as a potential replacement.
The councillor's got his hand up, so councillor, do you want to come online and ask your question?
Yes, hello, thanks for the presentation. Just firstly to clear up any confusion around why I've been labelled as a councillor. I'm not here with that hat on. I'm afraid I must have used this Teams account last night for a council call, so that is another hat that I wear. I'm based in Tyneside. I'm here in my sort of day job capacity, so I support organisations with their sort of impact management, which includes the Foundation of Light in Sunderland. So that's the main interest why I'm here today. Is I've been helping them for, throughout the year, trying to tidy. So that's where the question about views comes from, because they also run the KICS program, and but they have to use Salesforce for NCS because that's the system that NCS use. So yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
So one thing I should say, it's very, in fact, Remy's responsible for the views as well, and it's very easy at the moment. We're just porting one to the other because we suspect the Premier League are going to change their package very soon. It's obviously it's a very unique package views at the moment, which is used by the 115 professional clubs, whereas Salesforce is available for thousands and thousands of businesses all over the world. Yeah.
So Lucy, I know you had a question. Do you want to come through? You're on mute.
Hi, thank you. So I put it in the chat as well, but thanks. That was really helpful. Thank you, and gave us, I think, lots of ideas for how we can start to make Salesforce really useful for us. So my question was just around capacity, staff capacity that you have to kind of invest in making Salesforce come back with all this really useful, amazing kind of evaluation. And we're a really small team, and I think the thing we're struggling with is kind of investing that capacity to make it work for us. And I just wondered if you could say something about that. And for example, like, is Remy full-time on this, or does he juggle it with other things?
So this was one of my concerns when I first looked at going into choosing a package, because I'm very mindful they can become a life of their own and take over. So that's why it was really important that when we worked with Salesforce, that they could develop our staff competence as well to be able to deal with it. Remy's got another job as well, but Remy's job is very much, because he's at the centre, he has to know everything. All our staff have to know everything about all our projects. And so he facilitates that, and he can say a little bit. But one of the things I would add, and I don't know what your team size is, but again, there is something as well. And again, this is working with Clyde, and it touches on what we just spoke about actually, is that if we can become, and Kickstart has been quite a good benefit here, but if we can become a vehicle where, so obviously we'll have a service contract with Salesforce, but that as part of their partner, if we can become a vehicle to train people in Salesforce, where that training comes through our provider, ShoNet in this example, but they can also then be based with us on a practical basis of doing things. It helps because we're not flush with money. And obviously what we try to do in any organisation is minimise your central costs and do that. So bringing some people in to help Remy, but the cost to that to me is very minimal. But at the same time, we're developing them as apprenticeships to move on. Remy, what's your, you got thrown into this and you do have other jobs. So what's, and this is all unscripted. So don't worry.
Yeah, so I'm not working on Salesforce full time. But what I will say is, because there's quite a lot of data on it, there's quite a lot of management needed. So that's where the young people will come in. So I'm going to get a little army of young people that will then learn Salesforce. Yeah, to actually keep the database clean, really. That would take the most time, I would say. But I don't do it full time, no.
When you say keep the database clean, because there was a lot of work when we transferred from our old system to put it all on in the first place.
Yeah.
So when you start using any new database, if you try, because it could be, for example, if somebody's name is St. Clair, it's entered wrongly into this. It's entered wrongly into the information. Somebody might say ST and someone some other way. So when you talk about data clean, what do you mean by that, Remy?
Yeah, well, so obviously we started using digital forms. So person registers, but then they fill out quite a lot of booking forms. So there is validation there that we use, but sometimes a person misspells their name, gets their date of birth wrong. So it's those little things that we didn't want the form to block, because from a customer point of view, you might not know why. So we decide, okay, it can still go through, but then that's where we have to come in and change it on our platform, on our system, really. That's what I meant, yeah.
And part of that is because we've got young people filling the form as well, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah, it just happens. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Yes, there's a hand coming up. Oh, Ed.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah, thanks so much for this very eye-opening presentation on Salesforce. Are there any other aspects of your activities or operations at the foundation that you use Salesforce to assist you with?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, actually. Remember, I've only just taken you through the projects. That's one side of our business. The other side of the business, how do you administer everything and how do you run everything? So, for example, everything we do, and I touched on it at the beginning. So from a risk assessment point of view, everything we do, there has to have a safeguarding agreement. In fact, whoever we're working with, if it's not directly with the young person, there'll be a legal agreement in place. All of those agreements, any documents, anything like that is all attached on Salesforce. So you can click onto the document, you click onto Move for You and see the contract that we have with the particular funder. The other thing that we've created is we have to know for our own budgeting purposes. So for example, we start a new project, need to get a sense of what new staff do I need, what are their skills, competencies, and then what do they work on. So all of that information and what their timesheet goes onto Salesforce. So then when we do the payroll at the end of each month, we know from a management information, how do we allocate those costs against the project. So everything that we do administratively is increasingly being linked to Salesforce. And that would take another whole presentation to show that. But basically, and one thing I should add, which I didn't say, so, you know, I've been in many organizations where they've decided we're going to get a new system. Then you have to have all these links to all the other systems, and that's what can really take time. So Clyde and I discussed this, and I said, I don't want a new system because actually we use all the club systems, we use all corporate systems, and there is really like a ring of steel around those systems about what can, because of security measures and things like that. And I knew if I wanted Salesforce to have to integrate with every one of those systems, which we use the club finance system, the club HR system, the club safe, if I needed to do that, it would take me much longer to introduce it. So in essence, I wanted a system. Imagine you have a table which has got lots of plates on top, and each one of those plates is your corporate system. And in my example, it's the corporate system that I use, which is through Spurs, but it could be any corporate system you have. I decided I wanted a tablecloth that laid across all of them, which is the Salesforce platform, and which then we chose what information we would feed up rather than Salesforce going in and grabbing it. And what that did is minimize any risk exposure at all to the club or any fear. So they were satisfied that Salesforce could be standalone, and the way that we organize the feeding of information through, that they were protected. And that enabled me to accelerate what I was doing. In fact, it saved a huge amount of costs in doing it. And so we use it for everything. So we're just about actually now looking at how can I use it more for our budgeting, because again, if you think of what Salesforce is, it's customer relationships management. We spoke about participants being in there. If you were to invoice, well, Clyde, obviously ShoNet invoices us. So ShoNet go into the system as you know, we do, they send us sales invoices. So they go in as one of our contractors. And if we put Salesforce or Clyde's name or Aisha's name into the system, it will come up Aisha Akulu, and it will show that she's from Salesforce. If I met with Aisha, I would then have to make a note when I've come back, met with Aisha on such and such a day, we discussed X. If somebody else is going to meet with Aisha, they can look into Aisha's name and see, Sarah met with them. So we're using it as a customer relationships management tool as well. And the other thing from the participant side, because some of our participants, well, it's a good example with the Move for You, some of those participants we work incredibly closely with. We're dealing with their personal health issues. So it becomes a case management tool as well. It really just, so anyone we interact with will be in that system, whether it's staff, whether it's participants, whether it's contractors that we bought things on, they're all in the system. But today we just looked at the participant side.
Thank you, Sarah. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I think there's actually one other hand up. So we'll take that question before we close.
Hello, I think that might be me. I just wanted to quickly ask about the forms, because this is something we've been talking to Aisha about, whether we sort of pay for form assembly, or I know there's lots of other platforms out there. So I just wondered, Remy, if you could just remind me the form template that you use, the form, you know, the program, the add-on. Yeah,
so it's form assembly that we use. Yeah, and a reason why is because it's easy to link with Salesforce. That's why we use form assembly. Yeah, it was actually ShoNet that recommended it, and it's very simple. We're very happy with it.
The other thing that form assembly enables you to do, you know, because what IT people always ask you, whether it's ShoNet or any other company, they want you to say, well, what are you going to use it for? What do you need for? And all this. And I think, well, I know what I need today, but I don't know what I need tomorrow. And they think that we can predict the future, which none of us can anyway within that. So the beauty of form assembly and having a member of your staff team who works closely with the developer is that you can do that yourself if you develop those skills. Yeah. And we will develop other staff so that they can do form assembly as well. But that is one of the beauties of the product from my perspective. I can just say to Remy anytime, I want this now. He's like, all right, so, but he creates an electronic form, but it just enables us to manipulate, answer questions to board, anything like that. Gives us great flexibility.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sarah, I've got one last question to ask you. This project was actually initiated before COVID-19, before the lockdown. And there was a chance that we might have squashed it because no one was quite clear what was going on. You decided to actually proceed with it. Was it a help or a hindrance during COVID-19 and lockdown?
Well, obviously at the time we didn't know, but I was proceeding with it because, I think when we first went into lockdown in March, nobody knew how long this COVID was going to be. I think people thought we might come back after 2 weeks. But for me, this was a core part actually of the medium-term strategy. I wanted to become more efficient and I wanted to become an expert in manipulating data, because more and more we have to show social impact, we have to show evaluation and link it all through whatever the requirements are. So we decided to proceed, and I'd like to say thank God that we did decide to proceed, because actually, and in the COVID world, putting everything in from our own perspectives and using it remotely, because we've had to be able to do virtual and everything, it's been a godsend. So it feels like we were ahead of the curve. We didn't need any paper. Everything that we could do it remotely from home. It just made a huge difference.
Now, Sarah and Remy, I want to thank you, but I want to thank the participants, you who've actually stayed on and listened to us for this past hour. Thank you very much for actually joining. We actually want to do a lot more of this, where we actually take stories out to you in terms of here's what people are doing. And maybe you can actually learn a little bit from it and think about how you might use it in your own situation. So thank you for turning up to this event. We're gonna do one of these events every month. But I want to thank Remy and thank Sarah, because there's a lot of effort that went into putting this show together. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Clyde. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.